success is one of those things that what other people's perception of it is very different than each of our internal perception is. Um, and from an entrepreneurial standpoint, from a mother, a daughter, a sister, a wife, a leader, I think I I have a tendency to see a lot more failures than I see success. Um, the things that I do wrong, I think one of the things that I define success as is, am I learning from each situation? Did I learn and am I being better? Um, if I were to die tomorrow, um, would I have made a positive impact on everyone that I engaged with? And that positive impact, and I think this is the difference, it could be a hard conversation. So I've got a new granddaughter. She's my son got married and got a bonus family, and she was a great volleyball player. She's high school, and she was talking about going to get a college scholarship. And we do goal setting every Friday morning at 6 a.m. So I just had it with her this morning, and I said, "Oh, sweetie, you're not going to get a scholarship," and you could just see her face just drop. And she's beautiful. She looks like a, Swedish model. She's 6'2". She's an incredible player. And she said, "Why not?" And I said, "Well, why do you want the scholarship and to play volleyball?" And she said, "To pay for college." I said, first of all, D1, they own you, but two, that's not the right reason to get one. I said, "But you're not going to get one." And she's like, "I don't understand." And I said, "Well, you're not a consistent player." And I said, "You're brilliant at times, and then you're an opposite person showing up." And I said, "Coaches will not risk giving money to or having someone show up on a high-level D1 team in college if you're inconsistent." And you could see her face, just all the life pour out of it. And some people might think that's mean, but that, for me, and how I tried to say it, was true love. Like, I'd rather tell you than watch your heart get broken, and I'd rather give you the wisdom to create a different path. So she's gonna go into the Air Force instead, and, this morning when I was talking to her, I said, "Gabs," I said, "you seem like you're having so much fun playing volleyball this senior year," and she's like, "I am having a blast," and I said, "Is it because you're not having to worry about getting scouted?" And she's like, "Yeah." And it doesn't mean that someone shouldn't strive for that, but it wasn't in her heart, and you could tell it. So for me, success is being able to have, more often than not, the hard conversations that help somebody instead of the "Great job, honey. Here's a trophy. You did fantastic." Or "We just won a design award." Or, "I've got a best-selling book." Like, those aren't what define you. It's how you show up when it's really hard and have authentic conversations, and that you have enough street cred with that person because you've cared enough with them that they know your intention and they can listen and not get their feelings hurt. And that is the same way when someone's speaking to me.
Yeah. When someone speaks to you that way, like, how do you feel that?
If they're showing up in my life and really showing up, and it's with care, and I'll tell you, a couple people did this to me, that um, So, one was Dan Sullivan, strategic coach, and I'm a perfectionist, and I didn't, I couldn't get my book out, and he's like, "Lisa, you have like 10,000 books in you. You just need to do it. You need to stop being Ohio and stop worrying about what everybody else is going to think and just do it." So he said that, and that kind of got me over the hump. And then Mike Caning's, I was doing a TV show, and I said, "I'm so nervous. I'm so worried." And he's like, "You are the most selfish person I've ever met in my life." And I'm like, and I like pride myself. I'm like, "No, I'm helping with goal setting. I'm doing, I've got an orphanage that I help out. I'm, doing all this other stuff," like, which is a pride thing too. I'm trying to help, but you realize your ego gets involved. And I'm like, so it really like cut hard. And I'm like, Mike, what are you talking about? He said, you care more about how you look and if you're going to look stupid on camera than you do about helping somebody and giving them a nugget of your wisdom. And ever since then, I'm like, so I'm looking at you. I'm not looking at a picture of me right now. I could have something hanging out my nose. I could have, my glasses could be crooked. I don't know. I could have lipstick on my teeth. And the greatest actors that I love have weirdness to them, right? They don't have the perfect teeth and I got these eyes that, are puffy and hair that's never perfect and all that kind of stuff, but they're authentic. And so that advice that Mike gave me, but it hit me like a ton of bricks because he was right.
What I'm gathering from already just from this podcast, it seems like there's these ingredients. There's showing up, there's consistency, there's authenticity, but then you also have this pride and ego. And it seems like there's this battle that happens between these ingredients of who's going to dominate the dish, so to speak.
Yeah. And I think um there's a touch of narcissism where it could be ego. Um but you don't get to high levels without being able to believe in yourself and really push your vision in yourself, whether that's your physical body or your mental or your creativity or leading your team, even when you don't have 100% idea where you're going, but it's going to work. That cockiness or confidence. And I think there's a difference. Cockiness, you can be rude. Confidence is different. Um, but that's ego, and you have to balance that. Like, I know my software is going to work, period, end of story. Whether you want to do it with me or without me, that's your choice. Like, I know when I renovated the Warner House and did the docuseries and asked other designers to step up, I didn't beg them. I said, this is what I'm doing. It's going to be an incredible journey. I'm going to give you more than you could ever give me. And if you want to do this, let's do it. Um, I think when you see athletes that are great and entrepreneurs that are great, they have to have that. They have to have a little bit of that selfishness in them. You just have to check it with still being able to listen, surrounding yourself with people that have the honesty, like Mike or Dan or you, to tell me the truth. Um, being a lifelong learner and super curious.
Lisa, do you think that it's possible to be selfishly unselfish? Like, or do you need one to actually be to the other?
I think there's a balance. I think you can be so not wanting to strive or push anybody aside. Um, I just had this happen. So, in the design world, like my team will do a bunch of design and then I sign off on everything. And I'll get a gut that like, this isn't right where it's supposed to be. It's good and it's good
Hmm.
enough. But there's something that I have a unique ability to go, no, we can tweak this a little bit better. We can get more out of this. We can make it a little bit more. Every time I err on the side of, I don't want to hurt the person's feelings and I want to let them just shine. And I felt that, I get backhanded by the client. The client sees exactly what I saw and I knew it. And so it's a weird yin yang that I think people have to balance, almost like walking a tightrope over top of Niagara and you're sitting there and you're like doing this constantly and people don't understand what you're doing, but every decision, every conversation, you're counting the cost. And the great thing is that when you are surrounded by people that want to create and trust and love, they're helping you out and going and looking at what's in your blind spot instead of going, why do you always, criticize? There's a difference when you have people that also want to be the best.
What do you think that separates people from just doing like the good and wanting to be the best?
Fear of being the best. I mean,
Ooh,
I mean, everybody says they want to be the best. Everybody says they want to have money. Everybody says they want to have a wonderful family. Um, but I think I think it's a lot easier to have low expectations.
It's so true. But it's more of like a self-fulfilling prophecy then.
It is 100%. So going back to Gabby on volleyball, a team had beat them last year and they lost to him again. And we go through and we set out the calendar for the next 2 weeks. And she's looking and she said, "Oh gosh, we've got to play Logan again." And I said, "Why are you upset about it?" And she's like, "Well, because we just lost to them. They robbed us." And I said, "Oh, they robbed you?" And she goes, "Yeah." And I said, "That's exactly why you lost." I said, "They didn't rob you of anything. You guys didn't show up. And if you have the mentality that somebody took something from you, you're never going to be able to be your best. It's a lot easier to be the victim than the victor. Because then you got to own that, right? You got to own that you lost and it was on you. Nobody did it to you. You did it to you."
Yeah. I've always said that, uh, like the Nelson Mandela quote when asked, after being falsely or being imprisoned for like 20 years to be like, "Hey, do you feel like you lost?" And if you go back and look at the interview, he's almost indignant. He's like, no, no, I never lose.
Yeah.
I'm either winning or learning. And to your point, what you're talking about, I think when you move to that victim mode, you actually have lost because you got out of the cycle of you're either winning or learning, because learning is actually just a future winning.
It is. And quite often it's more important.
Ooh, say more about that because I think that that's gold.
I think that when you're striving for something, and you miss, right? You learn much more about the miss and what to avoid. So, you let's say we're in high school or something, and you have too much alcohol, and you might end up on, over the golden throne toilet throwing up all night long. Not saying that I might have done that, but I still can't have a screwdriver. So, having that learning has helped me the rest of my life to know where my limits are and to not get me in a situation that I could possibly be in danger. And that's just a little thing. Same thing with almost wrecking your car because you were texting and going, "You know what? This could have been much worse. I need to stop, refocus, and stop, multitasking or paying attention to everything else. This is not, I need a reset." And when you're not learning, you're not making any of those mistakes. And then what happens is mistakes still happen. It just could be the one that kills you or kills your company or a friendship or your marriage. And so I'd rather make a million micro mistakes and learn from them and then constantly correct and tweak than just win, win, win. And then all of a sudden I had no idea X, Y, and Z was going to happen. And then everything's gone. And I don't even know. I don't know how to recover. I don't have the muscles mentally or physically or with friendships to be able to get through it.
Yeah. I have found that um, winning creates a false pedestal, and then you actually start losing because you've removed yourself from, I think, the balance of what mistakes in the learning process through there's a humbling factor that when you make mistakes, and not like you need to be humbled, but there's a level, it's like it's necessary part of the diet.
Absolutely. Yeah, it is a necessary part of the diet. I mean, you ski, right?
Yep.
So have you ever fallen?
Oh, yes.
Have you ever come too close to the edge?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think all that learning, do you have children?
Yes, I do. Yep.
So when they're starting to do it because of all your learning, you're able to be a better parent.
Yeah.
So you're able to, like, the learning is not only for you, it's for those around you to be able to guide them, but also not freak out and allow them to grow and fail on their own.
Yeah. I think that's probably one of the hardest things like having 4 kids is that the failing is actually the necessary part of growing, and not allowing them to fail is actually the growth of the inability to fail.
100%. 100%. I mean, they've got to figure certain things out. And there is the learning from that. Like if they get a job and they get fired from that job, that's their deal. Mommy shouldn't be calling. Mommy, I've had people call to set up an interview for their daughter. Like asked to come in with them for the interview. These are college graduates. And like, no, we don't do that.
Yeah. This interview that we just had is over.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I don't think you understand that you're actually handicapping your child.
Lisa, you'll probably get a kick out of this, but I recently had done in the last like 6 months an exercise that I looked back at all of my bad decisions, or quote unquote would have been deemed as potentially a bad decision, maybe by an external auditor, and all of my indecisions. And what I found was I didn't ever actually have a bad decision. I had a decision that led to the learning that actually led to like massive winning and like relational, purpose, financial. But where I actually found the biggest actual losing was actually in all of the indecision.
Yeah, because that's where you're lukewarm. You're neither warm nor cold. That's the worst one. When Jesus in the Bible in the end, he's like, to the church of X, Y, and Z, you I have the biggest problem with because you're lukewarm. And I'm like, what? Like he's really upset at the lukewarm people? Like, you're not more upset at the bad people? He's like, no, I'm more upset at the lukewarm because you won't make a decision and a commitment, which is like wild when you think of it like that, like just that. It's like, yeah, it just at our office every Monday morning, we each have to do a transformer. We each have to say one thing that we've screwed up on or wouldn't want to have happen again in the past week. And then how we would do it differently. And then we teach everybody about that. And what that does is it transforms a team into thinking that you should hide mistakes into teaching moments and coaching moments for everyone to make us better every single time. And the folks that can't do it don't last long.
So you've basically helped create a culture where shame is not part of the formula. It doesn't have to be part of the formula when you make mistakes.
One of my designers been with me 13 years, and he would say, at the first, I thought Lisa was just going to hide this all in my HR file and use it against me. And then I realized that she appreciated more when I was open about a mistake that I made than a win that I had. And he said, we gain. So, for instance, if somebody makes an error and they come out in it and we say, okay, where was the flaw in this, right? What happened? And problem solve through it, that could keep 3 other people from making that same $20,000 mistake in the company. And so that person that actually had that learning now feels like a hero. And so, I mean, you still have to balance it. If they keep on making the same mistake over and over again, they never learn, that's different. And that can be caused from inexperience. So a lack of training we can do something on. That could be caused from belligerence. Or, they just aren't the right person in the right seat for that. So you have to then define why they're continuing to make that error over again, even though we've went through the supposed learning. And sometimes somebody's just do not ask me to do some physics calculations. It ain't going to happen. I'm not a great speller. I'm a designer. Belligerence, I can't do anything about. That is an internal battle with the person, and they have to make a decision how they want to move forward.
Yeah, I think that agency is probably one of the most underrated skills, like possible. And I think one of those agencies is attitude. The agency over your emotions.
Oh, unbelievable. And I think we've been lied to over the last 50 years. to think that our emotions are true.
Say more. It's so true. Your emotions count.
Oh, I'm happy. I'm sad. This is very traumatic. Blah, 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 blah. Your emotions will lie to you. They will absolutely lie to you. And case in point, you can't be like super angry at somebody or super upset over something and then watch a comedian say the most brilliant joke in the world and start laughing if that emotion was true,
Hmm.
because that emotion would stick. But that emotion can be manipulated and constantly, come and go as a wave, as a different. And if you don't learn how to regulate your emotions, it makes it very difficult for you to experience, I think, joy, which is not happiness. I think the root word for joy is more like a deep-seated kind of welling up of being able to do what you're doing that's creative, and it's kind of something in the soul versus an emotional thing. I think it's Seneca, I can't remember the exact word, but on the etymology, but it's a very, very different word compared to happiness.
I've always said that happiness is a transaction, joy is a transformation.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Yes. Yes. That is exactly. So, like, I'm not happy in my marriage, but we have a joyful marriage. At certain points we have had happiness, but this year will be 35 years of married, 45 together.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you. And, somebody very young in their marriage or on their second or third marriage, you'll be like, "Oh, that's sad." No. When you stick with something long enough, you have to understand there are peaks and valleys, and that's what makes being at the mountaintop at certain times and having a view so beautiful, and that when you're in the valleys are wonderful too. I think the difference is when you're climbing up or down and it's really hard.
Yeah. Well, not only when you're climbing up and down, but when you get to these peaks, if you're all alone,
Oh, yeah.
like that's that's not really living.
Well, we're not meant to be alone, period, and I'm an introvert, so I need, kind of my time, but we are meant to be in community, absolutely meant to be in a community, and when you find your tribe and you're able to have them be authentic and really push you to be your best you, which kind of circles back around to success, that's a feeling that's pretty cool when you don't have to watch what word you say, when you can show up and, talk about your yucks just as much as your bigs, and most often you don't wanna talk about the big things. You don't wanna talk about the awards you got or this because it's like, it doesn't it's not who you are, it's what somebody else put a label on the outside of you.
Lisa, in the beginning, I thought interestingly, when we were talking about success, it talked about all these different identities. You named them, like, myself, wife, mother, sister. And I keep coming back to this idea of it's better to be consistently good than occasionally great. I can't remember who to attribute that quote to, but in why is it so hard to show up, however we define what show up is, and then do it consistently? Like, why is that such a hard thing? You'd think, like, oh, I'm home, I'm with my husband, and I'm going to show up and I'm just going to be consistent. Like, why is it so hard when we think about our whole spectrum of identities?
I think there's 2 things. One, I think we are, overstimulated, and 2, we're overtired, and those 2 go together. Um, we are living in, like, one of the most incredible times in history, and we're also living in one of the worst times in history where, like, our brain doesn't get to be free just to think. We don't get to just be. Um, so you were talking about Mandela in prison. I've got, quite a few friends that were in prison for a period of time, and I'm like, "Wasn't it horrible? Blah, 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 blah," and they're like, "No, it was actually great. I actually got my law degree, or I did this, or I was able to work on myself and I had really nothing else I had to worry about. Which is interesting, right? Um, where from a mind standpoint, I feel like I'm more in prison because I've got so many things that I have to, okay, did we do this? Did we file the extension on the taxes? What are the kids doing? Who's got a game this week? Um, my mentor or my investor wants to know this. I've got this one associate that is, they're not growing, and how are we going to get them back on board, or are we going to replace them? Sales aren't where they are. Um, I really want to just watch this Netflix show and binge watch it because I just need to numb myself. The dog has to go out. I forgot to pick up groceries. I've got to be at this party. We are having a never-ending overstimulation that we actually have to figure out how to have a boundary and shut out the noise and then deal with the social repercussions. Like, my daughter's getting married, and I'm like, "Hey, did you see this on Facebook Marketplace? I think we should get this for the wedding." And she's like, "I shut down Facebook, when we got engaged." And I'm like, "What? Like, you can't do that. That's kind of some of the way our family communicates." She's like, "Well, I had to make room. I couldn't add one more thing." And I shamed her. And she's like, "Mom," she's really good at boundaries. And she's like, "Mom, no, I need this. And for me to be good in our relationship, he shut it down and I shut it down. We don't need that noise." And I'm like, "That's wisdom." Yeah, she's an old soul. But I did the bad mama thing and I shamed her. Now, I learned from it and I had to acknowledge it. And it was selfish on my part because I just want her to be at my beck and call when I'm sending her a Facebook link on Messenger or whatever. But I have to do it a different way.
Well, obviously, she got that from somewhere, right? She got that boundary setting from somewhere. What have you seen now that if you were talking to parents on how to actually do that to create that a process and structure for like teaching consistency, showing up, boundary setting, and quite frankly, boredom.
Oh, yeah. We were just talking about that. We were talking about how, somebody their kids literally will come home, and if there's not 15 minutes that they have something to do, they're bored. They don't know what to do. There's not space to allow them to figure out who they are. Everybody else is telling them who they are. They're a student, they're an athlete, they're a musician, they're a son, a daughter, they're doing chores. There's not a moment for them to explore who they are, to sit in silence, to walk out in the woods, um, to, take apart their bicycle and put it back together. Um, so the first thing is, shut down the phones as much as possible. It's way too much stimulus for a kid. There's study after study after study after study on this. I get it. You need to track them. You need to be able to communicate with them. But that scrolling dopamine hit thing is so horrible. It really is horrible. You wouldn't give your like 6-year-old or 12-year-old a Red Bull, a couple Red Bulls every day, right? But that's what you're doing with the phone or the iPad or the computer, letting them play video games. It's the same thing.
It is interesting. We had like an iPad, that occasionally we should get like, my 4-year-old would get like some, she'd be like, "Hey, can I watch blah blah blah?" And what was interesting was at the time it just seemed more convenient to be like, "Yeah, your mom and I are focusing on XYZ, or we're trying to have a conversation." And what we started finding was like behaviorally, things just started to go like not on brand of kind of who she was. And then we just made a decision that unless we are in a car that is at least like the destination is at least an hour away, we are only doing books or audiobooks. And I have to tell you, the transformation that we have seen, she will literally now self-play for hours, and she'll get lost in a story. Her stories that she's like telling us, I mean, it has just absolutely exploded. And it was just this little simple decision. And in the beginning, yeah, we engaged her more, but then all of a sudden we started that, we that now how we're engaging her is so different because of who she's showing up as.
So the difference is what everybody needs to understand is that she's participating when she's reading or listening. She is visualizing and creating a mental picture of everything that she's doing. The voices, so she's doing sound in her head, she's doing imagery in her head. So she's creating while she's listening or reading. When you're watching a movie, you're not. It's already there for you. There's no, how do I pronounce that name? What does that tree really look like? Um, so there's a different level of satisfaction when you're part of the creation process. So if you've ever, we would do Iron Chef Fridays with my kids, and we'd pick an ingredient, and then they would cook, just them, and then battle it out, and then the whole family would taste test and decide who won. And it was terrible. I mean, it was awful 99% of the time. Like awful. But they would have the best time ever. The best time ever. And when you cook food and eat it, the joy you get out of eating it is exponentially larger than when you order food out and just have it plated in front of you, or you're at a restaurant or whatever, or someone else is cooking for you. If you want to have fun together, cook together, right? Um, there is something, but you also have to, I would say, we did an experiment when the kids were young. And I said, for 6 months, we're not going to have any TV, any cable, anything like that. And it ended up turning into 6 years. And because everybody's like, this is awesome. And they went out and they created things, and they got in clubs, and they played sports. And the one thing I had them do was I got VHS tapes. I know it's really old, and DVDs, but I made them watch I Love Lucy and Shirley Temple and The Breakfast Club and Animal House. So because we've had this multi-generational family, I needed them to be able to relate to my parents and their grandparents and their great-grandparents, and talk about it and watch things that they would understand, and I needed them to be able to relate to me, hence Breakfast Club and certain things like that. And that was able to do that. And they actually got great joy over that.
What I find interesting is I think you just outlined a little bit of when we think about not just beyond childhood, when we think about in your different identities of when you're watching something, which often that's what social media is, you're watching other people's life, is that you are not actually in the creation process. You are actually becoming a product of the process versus being part of the creation process of having to visualize is that there's a certain sense of like pride and achievement, and not only that, but how you view maybe like how C.S. Lewis talks about, Aslan, right? In The Lion, right, is going to be different for everyone. But I think that's the beautiful thing about the human mind, where I think that I'm not worried about AI massively disrupting the human beingness of it, but I think that if you are uh, actually just showing up and be like, tell me what, like, give me the regurgitation of what it is I need to know. Well, what I'm just garnering from this is that you're actually being the product of the process rather than being part of the creation of the process. So in your identities of mom, wife, sister, is that you have created not only for yourself, but for your kids, this ability for them to be part of the creation process rather than be the product.
I think that's exactly it. We decided, instead of putting them in private school, to be able to do these big epic trips every year. And they'd have to do reports, and we do learning, and go to archaeological sites, and it might be Rome or Japan or Istanbul or, um, you know, Ireland or wherever, Belize. Um, I don't have a lot of photos. And everyone's, do you have photos of your kids? Do you have photos of these things? And I'm like, no. And they're like, why not? And I'm like, because we were actually there, like fully present there. And I'm a little sad that I don't have photos. But on the other hand, we were so present that I will always have those memories. And I feel, you know, I feel like we were all showing up all the time because we weren't trying to get the perfect shot or pose for this. I wasn't behind the camera or trying to do a selfie. Um, and I've realized with a little bit of time too, the photos that I have that I thought at the time that were of me or a podcast or whatever, that I'm like, "Oh god, I look terrible in that. Oh, blah, 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 blah." Just wait 10 years because you're like, "Man, I look great. That was wonderful." But at the moment, you are so judgy on yourself. And if you can step back from judging and start participating and creating.
Why is it so easy to be judgy of ourselves and others? I mean, it goes. It's like rather than being the victor, it's so easier to be the victim. Like, but why is that so easy? Because you're totally right about the pictures. We have a skylight, and we have two of them. We have one that kind of goes through in terms of like our son, who died, and so it's the kind of that's the one that keeps his memory ever present with us. But then we have one that is of that Jenna has every week been reloading, going back through as she's breastfeeding our youngest, in the middle of the night. She's just going back through, and then she uploads, and it's become this sort of fun thing that my 4-year-old likes to go and hit like the new photos, and while we're eating breakfast, all of a sudden we're reliving these memories. But it's so interesting because I remember so distinctly in many of those photos at the time, Lisa, we were going, man, do not look good. I'm not loving that photo. But now in now 10, 15, years later, you're going, hey, hey, that was kind of looked like a snack.
Yeah, exactly. I think we judge ourselves, but we judge everybody else too. I mean, so part of one of my superpowers is judging. I'm an interior designer. And so, like, it's also a curse. Like, I can't walk into a restaurant or a place without, like, "Oh, that trim piece is wrong. Well, that light's a little bit too big. This is X, Y, and Z." So you can't really enjoy unless you just kind of have to compartmentalize and step away from that and trying not to do that. And I think the more, it's interesting, the less you judge yourself in those things, the more people wanna hang out with you. Like, because there is something that happens like a shield around your spirit when you're trying to protect yourself and look the right way and have the right angle and not just laugh and look stupid and say the right thing. And when you have this protection shield around your spirit, people know it, and they real people don't wanna waste their time trying to poke through that. And in true friendship and collaboration, um, and connection is when you can press that button and that shield comes down and their shield comes down, and you're able to really kinda, like, connect, not always agree. I don't wanna mistakenly say that it's agreement, but connect and really share, and, whether that's vulnerability or happiness or whatever. Um, and when you do that, there's something special about that. But it's hard, and I think social media has made it so the kids are putting up the shield nonstop. I mean, how many videos have you seen of somebody filming themselves in a mirror?
That's pretty much all of it. If you go to just your search function on Instagram and you look at the tiles, my guess is probably 95% of them are that.
Yeah. Like, you know, I slur my words and say stupid stuff and can't pronounce stuff all the time. But if you look at me on social media, somebody's going to take that one snip that was brilliant, and that's who everybody thinks I am 24/7. And the majority of the time, I'm like, look, English is my second language. And they're like, really? I'm like, it's not, but I have a hard time. I make up words. I don't say things correctly. Sometimes things don't all fire like they're supposed to up here. I'm fatigued. Sometimes I get irritated. Like, that is not who I am. That's a that's the trailer for the movie. It doesn't mean the movie's good.
Yeah. But let's talk a little bit about that, Lisa. Obviously, the Lisa that I first got to meet, 10 years ago was just like, I mean, well, still the Lisa you are in my mind, like today is just this incredibly uber successful. You and I met in a group of basically like the top entrepreneurs in the world. But obviously that's not like you, right? That's the projection. And the thing that you just are talking about when you want to have collaboration and you drop that shield, it's almost like going from the iPad where it's already fed to you, right? Like here, my name's Lisa and here's all the different things, right? That's projection versus when you're actually part of the creation process and you drop it is they get to see that. So my question is, have you always been this successful? I mean, when you think back to like your childhood, I mean, is this you? Like you've always just been like a winner?
So I don't I think the words winner and success is really hard for me. I've always been people are like, you do so much, you blah 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 blah, almost like it's a bad thing. When I was younger, um, when I was real young, it was like, I had created a clubhouse and I was student council president and I went to leadership camps, and my mom used to call me bossy, although I was in charge of my two sisters that were a year and 2 years younger than me. Like as a female, it was not a good trait, not something um, that you should strive for. It was just me. It was just me. And I tried, man. I tried to be quiet. I tried to not create. I tried to not stick my nose in where it didn't belong. Um, I tried to not solve problems to like get along, and my mouth would get me in trouble, but my mouth also got me in the right rooms. Um, like I have just a core of wanting to make things better and systematize them and clarity and in ignorance of not knowing when I should keep my mouth shut. And it all hasn't always been in my favor. Hasn't always been in my favor. And so um I think I am who I am. I don't consider it successful. Other people look at what I'm doing and working on and all the things that are going on. They're like, I don't know how you do it, but I don't know how I wouldn't do it. So it's not something I'm like trying to do, or I'm like writing a list and saying, hey, this is what is successful and I'm going to do this. It's more like this is in my being and I have to express it. Does that make sense?
It does. It absolutely does. I mean, there's a bunch to like unpack there, but I think, uh, like, what does it take to actually unlock your being? Because that's the visual I'm getting when I'm listening to you is that there's the internal who, I'll put it this way. I was coaching out in LA maybe about 4 weeks ago, and one of the clients out there had said, there's life that happens to you, life happens like for you. But they said something that was even more profound. Like those are the two ends that I'd heard. But then they said something, then there's life that happens through you. And so I think about like the Lisa who you are today is actually just a product of you being you, of what it was meant to go through you. And then there's the being of who you think other people should be, right? Like you were talking about, you know, well, as a woman, I shouldn't do this, which just as an aside, I just don't understand why you can't be great, like, and have feminine.
Yeah, it's a unique thing that's happened over the last, I think, 100 years. It really is. When you go back and study history, when you look at the Bible, like even women in church, not being allowed to preach or whatever, you look at there were, some BA, prophetesses in the Bible.
Yeah, you can say badasses.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Badasses in the Bible. Like there's like 150 different women, over 150, that were just incredible and held up. And yet in the last 100 years, it was like, no, be quiet, shut up, blah, 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 blah. This is, you know, man stuff. I think I don't know the reason why that was. I know that my grandmother that was Italian, married a German, and she did things that like she was like 99 when she died, but when she was in her 50s, she took their farmland and decided to develop it. Didn't tell my grandfather or told him and he didn't care, I don't know. So she couldn't get a bank loan by herself. So she asked her brother-in-law, you know, she was an excellent cook. They had restaurants and different things at various times, and said, "What meals can I make you that you're gonna pretend to be my husband, go down to the bank and sign the loan?" And he did that, and she put in roads, she put in sewer, she put in electric, and did a whole housing development when a woman didn't even have the right to get a loan without her husband's permission. So I have that, and then on the flip side, my grandmother that lived with me, that was West Virginia, always had lipstick on, always looked to the nines, and combed my grandfather's hair every day. And when she lived with me, though, and my grandfather had passed, I got to know her not as my grandmother. And I'm like, "Wait a second, you were the lead in the High School Musical?" And she was 96 when she passed, and this was, 8 years ago. You played on the girls' basketball team? I didn't even know they had basketball. You played the violin? And it was like when she became a wife and a mother, all that had to be set aside to serve those 2 new roles. And that was sad to me because I would have really have loved to known her in those capacities. I would have loved that. And she didn't seem unhappy at all. So I don't wanna, you know, make it seem that way, but I think there was a period of time where females were put in a box. I think now you can do anything you want, and what I've realized is that we're not, the same, but we're equally valuable. We bring different things to the table, and I think that's the difference that we're starting to kinda, like, understand now, which is a beautiful thing, like, no, you are never gonna have a female athlete that's at the top of her game that can beat a male athlete at the top of his game, period. The physical structure of the body, everything else, it just doesn't happen. On the other hand, there are certain things I can do, like having a baby, that you can't do, and other things. So and they're beautiful in both respects. But I think we really boxed out that one category for a while, and at least for my generation, um, and then having an Italian family and that kind of stuff, it was a hard thing. I think now females have an opportunity to do anything, but I don't think they really recognize that they're still different but equal. I think they think they're same. They're not same, and that's gonna cause a big problem with relationships.
Yeah, I think what you're just talking about is such a big like such a big distinction between they're not the same, they're different but equal. And those two things, uh, then this no longer needs to be a competition.
No, not at all. Not at all. Now my son and daughter would say differently. They compete, like, hardcore after each other, um, but it's not the same kinda competition, right? It's in a beautiful way.
Well, it's so interesting. So my wife and I, she's been my business partner, my life partner, and when you live and work together, it can create some interesting dynamics. And it's one of the dynamics I think that Jenna and I came into. It was that like, well, who's in charge? And then it just led to these things of like all the things that we've been told, we're the same. But what I love about what you are talking about is I think Jen and I have gotten to the point is that we're different and equal. And in that, we've actually been way more collaborative, way more productive. We've been way more, if you want to talk about tangible things, way more successful when we stopped trying to play these like,
Who's supposed to do what?
yeah, who's supposed to do what versus going, we have these energies. And when we collaborate and we put these energies in the correct way, I got to tell you, well, number one, it's super hot.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's way more fun and so for me this is like a really important conversation. I have 3 daughters.
But I think you hit on something. That's why there's a lot of workplace affairs, is because when you are collaborating together, it is hot. There is something about creating with somebody else that gets you going, and when you strip that creativity out because you're role playing, I think you lose some of that essence um, of your relationship, because it gets compartmentalized, like, I can only do this at work, instead of, like, we can collaborate on our life and what we want our life to be and our family to be and our vacations and what our mission is for our marriage. Um, it's more like, "No, we're married, you take care of the kids, I take care of this, da 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 da," you know?
Yeah. Well, and it's one of the reasons why I've actually been saying for a while that you most people are like, I'm not an entrepreneur, and I'm like, are you married? They're like, yep, and I'm like, well, you that was your first company. That was your first company. And I think if you treat it that way, all of a sudden it's like you're creating this bigger future, right? Dan Sullivanism, make your future bigger than your past. And to your point, I think what I also want people to hear in this is that you don't have to go out and have create your own company if you're a woman for you to be a badass. And so, but I think though the thing is that it's not a role, but if you think of it as like you have a company and you're collaborating, and it's the only winning happens. I mean, truly winning, I think, is when you have this incredible cocktail of the energy. I mean, you get one side too strong, man, that's a cocktail you wanna send back, right? Be like, "No, excuse me, no, this is too sweet. This is too bitter." Uh,
And I think you have to realize that it's over time. Somebody told me, and I don't know who it was, but it was the best marriage advice I ever got given. And they said, "If you're married for a very long time, you're gonna be married to 7 different people, and you're going to be 7 different people, because you grow and you're different than you were when you were 18 versus 24 versus 30 versus 45 versus, and you're not that same person if you're growing and learning, right? And to sync up that growing and learning at the same time with your spouse is incredibly difficult. And so if you understand that, then you appreciate when you're both synced
yes.
and how awesome it is. And then it gives you kind of the breath to be able to take the unsynced and know that it will kinda, get back into that groove. And when it gets back into that groove, it's a beautiful thing and a beautiful season, and appreciate it, but you can't sustain that. It's outrageous to think we could. But I think Disney kinda sold us on a thing where, "Hey, you're gonna rescue me, and then I'm gonna be happy, and, everybody else is bad, and your job is just to protect and rescue me, and then I'm supposed to, cook and clean for the dwarfs." Like, it's a really weird thing, and right now, over the last 10 years, if you look at movies, how the little girls are being trained is the female teenager usually is doing all the battling for everyone and is the badass and doesn't need anybody, and that's not healthy either.
And then the spectrum.
Yeah, that's not healthy either. If you look at Hunger Games, you look at all the different movies right now, it's all this kind of teenage young girl that is the uber champion of the entire world that can fight ninja style and take everybody down and literally is the outlier leader and saves the entire world.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, that's It's kind of true.
Yeah, I mean, go back through and look at almost all of those movies and see where I was being raised that you're gonna be my savior, and here's what my job is, and every movie was like that. All the movies now are for the little girls, like, they have to be the strongest, the protector, the everything, and I don't know how that's gonna be with them.
Uh,
It's gonna make them feel like they can't feel safe, I don't think.
yeah. So if you're sitting here today and you are, whether they're, you know what, they've been in business for 30 years, right? But, you know, maybe their marriage has gotten stale, right? Or because they're on version 5, right? But the version 5 looks a lot different physically, mentally, emotionally than version 1. Or someone who's just starting off on their journey, what would you tell them? Like, hey, if you look at these 3 pillars, these like core values of how do you actually blend these uh these energies, this feminine and masculine energy in a way that is uh part of like co-creation, right? As we talked about, like dropping the shield, like what would you tell them?
So I think, I actually was thinking about this the other day because I'm, like, 57 years old, and I'm like, "Wow, man, I am finally starting to get it." I feel like I'm just, like really starting to, like, get rid of my anxiousness, trusting more, trying to be a better person, like, I have enough, fails behind me to not be so scared of them. When I first started my business, I was so scared I was gonna fail, and so scared I wasn't gonna make payroll. And to a certain extent, I think fear can be a great motivator and a great help to you as long as it doesn't overtake you and paralyze you. If you've ever been in a dream where you can't move, um, or in a situation where somebody goes, "Well, I would have just kicked him in the whatevers," and like until you're there, you don't know what you would have done. So if you utilize fear or stress properly, it can be awesome. And there's a perfect amount of stress. I was just hearing a speaker, that talked about it's about 15% that you need, and if you don't have stress, you're actually in a way worse situation. Um, Way too much stress and not having enough stress is bad. Um, so I think you have to learn that that is that's gonna be part of what you do, and use it in a healthy way, but don't let it rule you. The other thing is someone talked to me about a rubber band, and they're like, "Lisa, your life is a rubber band, your family's a rubber band, your business is a rubber band." And at certain points, it's gonna stretch out, towards one end really, really long, and it might be, you got a really big client deal you're doing, or you're doing an IPO, or, your kids, going to the state tournament, or you have, someone you love die. I mean, I know you had your son and I had my nephew that, was incredibly close to us and part of our family. Everything stretched towards that, you know? When you're stretching towards that, you cannot have a balanced life. And this thing about a balanced life is the biggest BS ever. And I think it traps you into thinking that everything's always horrible and not good enough because your circle is not balanced and perfect. And I think it's more about the season you're in and where you're stretching your rubber band and understanding that and communicating that to people you love. Like, "Hey, right now we're doing this." Like, my daughter wanted me to homeschool her at one point, and I said, "Okay, that means we don't go to Italy every year. We don't do this. We don't do that. Are you okay with that?" "Well, no." I'm like, "Well, you can't have both." "Oh, okay." I was trying to show up at every game my kids had, and then they were getting mad. And I'm like, "Wait a second. I just took a red eye to get here." And they're like, "Yeah, but I don't care about that." And I'm like, "Okay, what do you care about? Your kind of love language. Where do you want me to show up versus where I think I'm supposed to show up based on being a good mom or dad or spouse, okay? Or leader." So that rubber band and where I'm supposed to show up, right? Meeting them where they're at. And then the third thing that I would say is that opposed to your marriage, opposed to your children, opposed to, because they come and go, No one wants to experience a child dying or a parent dying or a spouse or a divorce or anything like that. But I have to root myself in God. And I do that every single day. And when I do that, and I'm aligned with my spirit, with God, I show up for everybody else in a much better way. And I actually am still connected to the people that have passed.
That's beautiful. And it's so true. It is so true. Um, what are some of the things that you feel like I like that you're challenging this like work-life balance, like everything's in balance. And I think there's all these idioms out there, which I always think an idiom is sort of like for for idiots, but like what are some of the other ones that you find that like we've been sold a bill of goods that is this in fact just flat like not true?
So work-life balance, I definitely think is one. Um, I think that we are poor. I mean, we live in one of the richest countries in the entire world. I hear people saying, I don't have enough money to buy a house. And I'm like, okay, I see your nails are done. I see your hair is done. I see you have a cell phone. You have a new car. You just went on 3 bachelorette parties that cost a couple $1,000s each. And you did a girlfriend's trip to the Bahamas. You're not poor. You're not willing to sacrifice. So you want everything without any sacrifice or giving anything up. And if I go back to my daughter, she wants a great relationship with her fiance. And so she gave up and sacrificed Facebook and the connection with her friends and things like that and has to do it in a different way. So she gave up the ease of that, but it was also, kind of a curse, right? Um, so I think we think sacrifice or servanthood is a bad thing right now, and it's not at all. It's a beautiful thing. And I'm not talking being abused. So let me be very, very clear about that. But I am talking about being selfless in a way and sacrificial in a way and servant in a way where since we're meant to be in community, we both can't be served at the same time. Nobody's getting food. So we have to figure out where we are at that moment and who needs us, and then also be willing to receive it. That's been really hard for me growing up is that I don't need anybody's help. I'm going to do it on my own. Well, fine. You didn't take out the trash right now. I'll take it out. If it's not on my time and the way I want it to be done, which is killer for a business and a leader, especially if you're competent in anything, fine, move. I'll just do it. And it doesn't ever allow anybody to grow or trust you because they don't know, you trust them. I mean, I used to get so angry at soccer. My son played high level, semi-pro in college, and my husband played, and then he coached D1. And I would see these elite Premier League coaches and different teams, and the coaches would sit in a lounge chair on the sideline. And I'm like, what are they doing? Like, stand up, show up, participate, coach your team. And my son would be like, you don't get it. They've coached their team already. Now it's their team's job to do their job. And the confidence and trust they have to sit back when it's not going well and let those captains and let those folks do their job. Very, very different than American football, right?
Yeah. Yep. Very different.
Very, very different, where everybody's got microphones in their ears, they're looking at everything, they're calling plays, they're doing all kinds of stuff. There's a certain amount still. But I looked at that and I thought, that's a really interesting thing to allow, like you were saying with your kids, I think you have to allow your team to make mistakes, and then you still got to go in at the press conference and go, "Yep, we screwed up," and take it all on you.
Yeah. And then if you win, yeah, it was all on them. They did a great job.
Yep. And then I think the last thing is that everyone doesn't have trauma. Like the word is belittling to how it's being used, that their boss was mean to them, that they sent them an email. I see these things. They sent them an email over the weekend and they're not, appreciating their boundaries. It is so selfish to think that I'm supposed to respond. As a boss, your job is to respond to me. I pay you, you don't pay me. As a client, my job is to respond to my clients, not them to respond to me. So someone that has lost a child, somebody that's been raped, somebody that's been in a car accident, somebody that was in a war, somebody that is, there's lots of horrific things, sexually abused, horrific things that are true trauma. They're being put in the same bucket as somebody that their boss sent an email on a weekend or a client was demanding or a spouse or a parent or something like that. I'm like, it's not trauma. And you've got to stop using this word because what you speak out loud actually becomes real, like you said before. And so you're saying you're traumatized when you're not.
Well, what I love is that when you speak it out loud, the number one person who you want to be cognizant is listening is you. Like when you were talking about like sacrifice, other people have looked at when 3 years ago I stopped drinking. They're like, "Oh, that must have been a sacrifice." And I was like, "No, it was actually the best thing I ever did." The amount of time and like the things like I mean, when I look back through history, like all of like the worst decisions and the worst things that ever happened to me, like were right. I mean, like that was somehow involved in like the equation. And when I stopped doing that, it's like the universe opened up and said, you know what? Other people are going to say this is a sacrifice. This was an actual invitation.
Yes. Yeah. But you took it, right?
Yeah, and I took it, and I think trauma, like I think it's confused with hard things. Hard things. My friend Blake had sent me this text after my son died, and he goes, God must have really respected you. And I remember just going, and I remember distinctly going, other people, this is going to seem like this trauma. And for me, this was this incredible gift given to me by God. And I know it sounds really weird, and there's a ton to like to the we can unpack in a different conversation, but and that's really given me a different perspective on the things that maybe didn't go well, or like the client who's upset at me, or my spouse who I didn't show up for, or I didn't make that commitment to in that consistency, right? And that those are things that are actually happening for me, so that through me.
Yeah, no, I think that's exactly right. And I think on the consistency, if you're more authentic, consistency just happens.
Yeah, because you're not having to fake anything.
You're not having to fake it. And that was the issue with Gabby, right? She wasn't consistent because her heart wasn't in it. And so when your heart's in it and you're aligned, right? Truly aligned, not lying to yourself. There is this consistency and congruency that comes out in you that is a magnet for people, because it is so rare. It is like a precious, rare mineral or diamond, or, it is so rare to see someone truly congruent. And I think that y- y- when you can do that, and you can only do that when you're like, okay, what am I here for? Right. So I long time ago, I'm like, I'm here for one conversation. And I don't know which conversation that's going to be. God didn't tell me that, but I know I'm here for one conversation. And because I don't know which conversation it's going to be, I'm going to try and make every conversation count. Now, that can be annoying if you're my kid or my staff, right? But it's like, I don't know which one is gonna be the one that keeps somebody from committing suicide or bursts someone to be able to create an IE that or AI that stops all sex trafficking. You know, I don't know what the conversation is about, who it's gonna be with, where it's gonna be. All I know is that I'm supposed to have one conversation in this life, and all I can do is show up and be me.
When I think about all the things that we try to achieve as humans, like all these technological advancements and, this AGI and like our successes as entrepreneurs, this is the one that I think is like truly like one of the most elusive ones that the thing is all of the materials already exist. They just already exist.
100%. It's just rearranging them into different things. Everybody's like, "That's an incredible design. How'd you do that?" I said, "I stole it." They're like, "What are you talking about?" And I'm like, "Well, I was on this trip in Greece and I took this picture of this, and then I was over here, and then I was reading this book." It's all it's all from something else that I've recombined into something that I'm solving a problem for today. And so nothing's really mine. Nothing's really my team's. We're just rearranging atoms in a way that takes away pain and it makes it easier for people to be their best them. And that could be like a software, that could be a book, that could be a beautiful restaurant you walk into or senior living. It could be goal setting with my granddaughter. It could be anything, but it's just and that's the reason why we do goal setting, and I do it with sports teams and I do it with my kids and my family, is that it gives us a half an hour once a week each person to just realign the atoms and go, "Okay, this is what's important to me. This is what happened last week that I don't want to have happen again, and I'm gonna learn from. This is what happened last week that was awesome and I want more of, and I'm gonna be intentional about the next week or 2. I'm gonna put my body at ease and take it out of fight or flight because I'm actually gonna look at what's going on moving forward. So I'm gonna get a flight plan of where I'm going, and all of a sudden, when I have a flight plan of where I'm going, I can, like my whole body starts to relax. Like, I know what's happening Tuesday. I know on Friday I'm doing this. I know that I've gotta get packed by this. Those little tiny things reduce your stress and allow you to show up. An alarm reduces your stress and allows you to show up as long as you trust it, right? You gotta trust it. But when you do those things, you can just I think you can leapfrog removing alcohol. I've heard so many people talk about that. I've talked to, like, my kids when they were younger, and I'm like, "Don't drink," and they're like, "Yeah, but you did, and you still like wine," and I'm like, "Yeah, but every stupid decision I've ever made, I think, had alcohol involved." I'm pretty sure. Like, I know I've made some, like, bad decisions from a standpoint of intelligence, but emotional, stupid decisions were pretty much under the influence of something, you know? And so while I can tell you that, yes, I love a great glass of wine, there is a balance, there's a rubber band, right?
Yeah, there is. It's interesting. We have this incredible, when we built our house about 5 years ago, we built this incredible wine cellar. So we love wine and it's full of incredible wine. And, when I made that decision and then, interestingly enough, you know, Jenna's, through babies, it just like, she just wasn't drinking. And I wasn't like, hey, I don't think you should drink. All of a sudden, she just gradually came to the conclusion of like, yeah, like I'm like, why would I ever go back? And so what would seem like, man, what are you going to do with all of this like wine? It's actually created an opportunity because I'm not dogmatic about it. If I'm out and someone goes, man, this is a good wine, you got to try this. I'll take a sip. Just like and um but it's just I'm not drinking. I'm just literally just having a taste and because it's just like, wow, okay, well, that's pretty fantastic. But the wine cellar now represents an opportunity for memory creation, in that it is a future vault of value of dinners that we're going to host for people who I know who love wine, and I'm going to get like so much, probably so much more joy out of serving it and watching other people revel in it than I actually would have had Jen and I just open that up on a Friday night.
Had a group of entrepreneurs over to the house, and I have a bocce court. And the way the teams were up, I didn't play, and none of them had played bocce before. I had the best time because I got to actually, instead of being competitive and, being on one of the teams, I got to just soak up their joy. And it was so much fun to do that. I think sometimes stepping back and, watching your kid walk for the first time is way better than walking beside them.
Yeah. And the amazing things about those things is that it breaks it back down to, like our daughter 2 weeks ago just like smiled for the first time. And you just go, it is the best. And you think about that because that's like literally the first time. And then eventually you just go, well, of course you smile. Right. And we lose that wonder. And I think that I have found that for me, when I am in my best self is when I am in a place of wonder of, and it's interesting to see some of that rub off on your kids, like our 4-year-olds, when we're driving, should be like, look at that sky.
One of the things about success, when you were just talking about the baby smiling, is for me in my businesses, I no longer have fear that I'm going to make payroll or that we're going to be successful or I have to prove to somebody that I won this award or the governor's or that award or da 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 or that I've done this. I have a 4-month-old granddaughter that I bring to work with me every day, and I got to see her first smile. So I am successful for me means that I'm running a business that I can choose. I didn't get to do that with my kids. And I'm able to have her there. Not that everybody should do this, but I've chosen to do this because my son works with me. And we're able to have her here, and I got to see her first smile. Like, that is worth $1 billion to me. And when I was a mother and completely exhausted, it wouldn't have been. I'm in a different place than I was. I would have been like, that's nice. I love that. But I'm really tired and I got to get up and go to work the next day, or I've got to make sure that we are, boy, the furnace just went out. How are we going to pay for it? Those kinds of things. So for me, I'm successful in that I'm in a place that I'm allowed to pick and choose kind of how I do things now.
That is freedom. Lisa, what a great conversation. I mean, there's so many things I'm going to go back in this podcast and dive into. And I appreciate you touching on some of these ones that maybe might be considered a third rail, so to speak. Lisa, if people want to know more about you, they want to go, man, hey, how do I get more of Lisa? Whether you're from your design standpoint, from your books that you reference, in writing, or the docu-series, where can they find all of this information about you about?
So they could just go to lisamcini.com, and it's Cini is how you spell it, or Cini if you're, in Italy. But my first name, middle initial M, and then Cini. And you'll find everything there. And then I'm on Amazon and Kindle and all those other things. But you can find all that on that website. You can Facebook message me, whatever you want to do. So if you have any kind of issues or challenges, especially with anybody older in senior living, that I'd be happy to help.
It's and by the way, if you haven't seen her stuff, you go senior living. Okay, what type of big deal is that? I got to tell you, check out her stuff, and you're going to realize really quickly that Lisa brings just a different perspective and different outcomes to your life. Lisa, one of the things I like to do before we sign off here is allow you as the guest to give the last ripple, the last thought, the last word, the last challenge, the last kind honesty What would you tell our audience today as we roll out of this podcast?
So when my 19-year-old nephew passed away in a car accident, we kind of went back and looked at his Instagram posts. And one of the things that he said was, "Overuse, I love you." And so if my last thing is like, you can be a multimillionaire, a billionaire, you can have books, you can have, you know, shows on Amazon, you can have real estate and all that kind of stuff and tons of employees. But if you can't find people to love and connect with and then tell them like they need to hear it, that's it, man. That's what this is all about.
Say more I love yous. I love it. Lisa, thank you. This was so fun. This was so fun. And I appreciate your generous sharing and also willingness to provide some of that kind honesty and just challenging some of the things that I think people think are just standards. And so this has been a real great joy and loved having you on.
Thank you for listening. A big thanks to Elation Lab for the production and creative design. Remember to like, subscribe, and follow us on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. Keep listening for more Max